Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to this Aramaic word study. Just want to give you a short study on one word that just jumped out at me today, and I'd never heard it presented in this way, and so I just wanted to share that with you. And again, I want to preface this that I am not an Aramaic scholar, working on Hebrew, getting to proficiency there, and trying to simultaneously learn the Aramaic as it pertains to the apostolic writings or New Testament along the way. And so it is very exciting. I'm not here to give any illusions that I am a scholar at this, but my purpose here is to show you that if I am able to just give a little bit of effort and spend a little bit of time to learn the Hebrew language and learn the Aramaic alphabet, and just to study with the resources that are available to all of us online and in printed form, it can greatly enhance your knowledge of God's Word and give you better insight and understanding as to what the apostles were dealing with and what the mindset was of the time when the apostles first were carrying this gospel message. It can give you a better indication as to the words of Jesus. What did some of the colloquialisms and some of the rhyming and some of the word plays, what did they mean that maybe they understood differently during that first century than what we do today? So that's the purpose of this, is to show you that you can do this, and I want to give you the tools to do so. So as you're watching your screen, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to bring up the Bible program that I use called Dukrana, and it is a Aramaic search engine for looking up the scriptures. So you can find it at dukrana.com, and it will be your main tool to go to as you look into the Aramaic New Testament. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, currently you are seeing Dukrana Biblical Research. Again, easily found on the internet. It has what's known as, the Aramaic language can be written in numerous scripts, and scripts are just another fancy name of saying the different type of printing of the alphabet, or as they call it, the aleph bet, just to pronounce it the way they do. And so all of these characters that you see up here are their letters that correspond actually identical to the Hebrew letters. And there's wonderful sites to learn how to um, learn the Syriac script, the Syrtis script, the Estrangelo script, all different names for little different scripts that essentially are characters that all represent the same letters as what you can find in the Hebrew alphabet. And so what I want to show you today is how to navigate in Dukrana. And what we're going to do is go to this area down here called Peshitta tool and click on the Peshitta tool. And when you do that, you'll see this page come up, and here is where you get to select how you want the verse to be presented to you. And you may not, like the way that I'm going to choose, but it's what works the easiest for me. What I'd like to do is go to Matthew chapter 2. You see the pull down. Unfortunately, this is not set up really user-friendly. You start in Matthew, and if you want Revelation, you got to scroll all the way down. Again, not the way I would prefer to see it done. I certainly like the Bible Hub interlinear version methodology better, but this is all we have for right now. So I also like to use the BFBS, United Bible Society, Peshitta text with these options. I like to click the vowel signs. That helps me to understand the pronunciation. Also, what this Peshitta text is again, like in the Greek, um, the oldest manuscripts do not exist in a 100% entirety. It's not like today we can go to a bookstore and grab a Bible and have, from Genesis to Revelation all bound together, printed, and in order. You go back to the more ancient manuscripts and you can only find fragments. You can find one book here or there. And so there are hundreds of Aramaic text or Peshitta documents that exist that the United Bible Society put together and combined, borrowing from each one to create a USB text, and that's what we're using here. And there are different sources where these manuscripts come from. If you study the Greek, you'll see that there are four basic text types: the Byzantine text, the Sinaitic text, there's Alexandrian text. Again, you get the flavor here of where these documents are found, and it allows you to be able to categorize them. And so the same thing exists with the Aramaic documents. There are numerous ones that come from the western side of Europe, more heavily influenced by the church that existed in the West. And then there are those that come from the eastern side, which is more heavily influenced by the church that existed in Babylon, in Iran, Iraq. I prefer the eastern text. I feel it has, I don't know, it gives me just a better feeling, and I understand the origins better because the history that I am reading tells me that the Apostle Peter was the leader of the Eastern church at the time. That's where he stayed. That's where the Aramaic and Syriac originated from. The Eastern Church, again, there's fascinating books that you can read about the Assyrian, or I should say Syrian church, and its difference from the Roman church that became the Catholic Church. And they're very different, and they have different teachings, a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. And again, the Eastern Church was not under the influence of the deal that went on with Constantine. It wasn't under the influence of the Nicene Creed. It wasn't under the influence of things that happened in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea. And so we get a different flavor, and I tend to like that a little bit better. You may disagree. I also like to put up the Hebrew text because, as I mentioned, I am much more comfortable with the Hebrew and being able to follow that. And so I like to see the Hebrew text above the Estrangelo text here of the Syriac and just use it in that way. So that's why I check these. So we check Matthew chapter 2, we check these boxes, scroll down a little bit, and of course there are other ways you can set this up. You can have cross-references with English translations. You can have the Greek come up if you're familiar with the Greek, and then there are these other palimpsests, the type of writings, this different Bibles, the old Syriac Bible versus the King James. So a lot of things that you can use to compare. Again, I don't use that right now. So we're going to hit load verses, and you'll have to scroll down once you get to that. And so what we want to do, what we see here, and it might be a little small for you to look at, but you will see Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. You'll see the Estrangelo script above it. What's kind of neat is you can hover above it, similar to what you do in Bible Hub, and it'll give you an ID number. You'll see a number 2 at the beginning of this series of numbers, that's really supposed to relates more to an S, isn't Syriac, which is sometimes another word used for Aramaic. And it basically means the same way of identifying it as you would find a G in front if you use a Greek lexicon, or you find a H in front if you were to use a Hebrew lexicon. So it gives you the root of the word, gives you a phonetic pronunciation, and just very helpful, like what you may have found in your other um, Bible studies. Down below, it will give you it's the exact same word, but it is in the Hebrew characters. And what it does is it allows you to take what you know in Hebrew and get a visual, that here is the kaf, and you look up here and you see the kaf. Here you see the dalet, and you look up here and you see the dalet has the dot in the bottom versus the resh, which would have the dot over the top. And as you see this comparison, you begin to just get an understanding and start to learn the language, and suddenly these characters will become familiar to you, just like when you studied Hebrew, how long it took for you to get used to those characters. Hopefully it didn't take you as long as it took me, because it took me a long time. Old brains don't work quite as fast, and I worked at it for going on 5 years now to get to a place where I'm finally um, can read with the Nicodim and be somewhat fluent. Still learning the vocabulary, but again, don't let that be a put off for you. It is so worth it, so rewarding, and so worth it. So with that, you'll see a very important hot key here, and that is the word for analyze. So click on analyze, and up will pop another window, and you may want to expand this window. But what you will see here is, let's see, looks like I have to do another screen share to get this other window to pop up. Okay, here we go. So now you should see this other window pop up. Sorry for the pause here. I'm switching between screens on what is showing up with the screen share and what is showing up as I'm trying to navigate. So there's two little things going up here. What you see is Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. It will show the Aramaic, Syriac script up above here. And then what you are seeing down below is the some translations, and in these translations it gives you Etheridge, which as you study the Aramaic, you'll see that he was profound in his translation, as was Murdoch. Lamsa was also a native Aramaic who came up with his own translation. All very valuable to see what they come up with. Again, great sources for us. We want to look at the word for the Magi. Obviously, in the King James Version, it's translated as wise men. You'll see in these other ones, it's Magi, Magi, and Magians. And then it's got a little footnote up here of something different. But what I want to show you is that with this, this brings up every word as it's found in this Aramaic scripture, and it starts at the top. It gives you the word, gives you the ID number, the root, gives you the part of speech. It gives you their maybe 2 to 4 word translation or 1 word translation, whatever they can fit in the box. And that's fine to help you identify it, but we can go deeper than that. And that's where I really want to show you that this ID number, which is 2072, excuse me, 11382, you can click on this ID number and up will pop another screen. And what I need to check is when I go to these screens, they don't seem to pop up in the presentation window. So I have to close out and now go back into it again so that so that we can take a look at that word. That didn't happen. I need to stop that again. Okay, here we go. You should be able to see this now. Yes, you can. Okay, where this gets really what we're looking for here is it gives you the root, it gives you the word, it gives you some phonetics on how it's spelled, but it allows us to look up, it does have some um, identification of the word down here. It really doesn't translate it, and we're trying to find out what is this word magi. These are incredibly interesting people that we see in the scriptures. And one of the sources, as you look here in the lexicon, you'll find numerous sources available, but the one that's MJ is, of the abbreviation MJ is the one I'm most concerned with that I want to show you, and that is Yastros. And Yastros is a Jewish commentator who went through what's called the Targumim, or the the additional writings in the Hebrew scriptures. These are the commentaries that the Hebrew scholars put down into writing about, excuse me, about 300 AD through 900 AD. And they are fantastic for helping us to understand some of the words and the meanings as we knew them during the time of Jesus. So we want to look at Yastros, and you will be able to click on here with Yastros, and it will take you to that page. So I'm going to click on it. Again, I'll have to go out and do another window share so that we can see this. Okay, here you have the Astros. And what is so fun about this is, first of all, you have to be able to navigate it a little bit. So to know the Hebrew alphabet really, really helps. But as you scroll down, we're going to see here that it talks about the Magi and where the word magician came from. And let's see, hopefully you can see that. Yes, you can at the bottom. What you'll notice is that the base for this word and where this word came from, and why they associate it with a magician many times, is that he is saying words he does not understand. And looking at the small print at the bottom, it says that this person, a Magian, mumbles and understands not what he says. Now, where that jumped out at me is because of an understanding that I had in one of the Hebrew studies I was doing today, and that is in 1 Samuel chapter 10, where Saul, who is soon to become King Saul, has been anointed by Samuel, and the Spirit of the Lord comes over Saul. And it says that the Lord changed his heart. He became another man. And then it uses some interesting terminology that he met with some of the prophets, and it says that Saul prophesied. Now, that's what it says in our English translation. If you go to a Hebrew Bible, it will say that Saul spoke in ecstasy, and that he was in a frame of mind of ecstasy, that where he spoke words that, again, our English translations who are may not give us all the same understanding, but this gives us an indication that he had an experience with God that allowed him to speak in ecstasy. And this reminds me so much of the day of Pentecost, of when the 120 in the upper room were filled with the Holy Spirit, began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. This would have been speaking in ecstasy. And so this just is so incredibly fascinating to me. First, that King Saul had this type of experience, but also this gives the impression that these men who followed the star, who followed a calling of their heart, a prompting of the Spirit, however you want to put it, may have been moved by the Spirit in the same way that Saul was, that they, if you want to use the word prophesy, or they spoke in ecstasy to show that they had a relationship with God that allowed them, that they were known for saying things that could not be understood. Now, I've never heard anybody teach this. Again, you may disagree with how I'm interpreting this, but think about these wise men. If they were magicians like the one that Paul ran into, that he condemned, and the guy went blind and was, he was a sorcerer, Simon the sorcerer. Okay, that's the way we understand magicians. But would God have touched these men? Would God have prompted them to leave their homes and depart on a possibly 2-year long journey at their own expense, following the star to come and see the Christ child, and and deliver him unto him the gifts, the 3 gifts that are identified? I believe something happened with these men, and that they were not just pagan sorcerers. I believe there's enough indication here to allow me to believe that they at least had a very similar experience to the prophets and to what Saul had as described in 1 Samuel chapter 10. And why not? Why would this not be something that someone else could have experienced? And so here, if you think of it that way, these men were called by God. I believe they were holy men. I believe they were righteous men who were seeking after God, or God would not have revealed this situation to them and allowed them to come and meet the Christ child. And so I wanted to leave that with you. I know it will pique your interest, of course, like it did me, but it gave me a different understanding, potentially, for these men, these wise men, the Magi, and who they were, and that they were men that very well, and I believe, could have had a experience with God that gave them a new heart, that they spoke in, did they speak in other tongues as the way Saul did, as the way the prophets did? I know we like to think that this is only, or we're taught, I guess, that this is only a New Testament experience, but could God have given some of these experiences to people who truly sought after him, who truly gave their lives to know him and surrender their lives to him? I think it's very possible. And so with that, I want to leave you with that Aramaic word study, and pray that God will bless you as you continue to study his word more. All right. God bless you, and thank you.